So hello everyone. As you've heard, I'm an engineer, and before we'll start, I'll say that last night I went over the presentation again, and I saw this image of the spacecraft which I cropped on Photoshopped, and I thought maybe for a group of designers is not the right thing to do, but I actually decided instead to be ashamed of it to use that moment, and first of all admit that I'm probably the one with the least designing skill in this room. And also to say that, as you can see, we do need talented designers to volunteer in SpaceIL to make sure this won't happen again. So if you're interested, go to our website and you can register. So we'll start. You heard a bit about my background. I like to say that from early on, I believe that it's important to be part of something bigger than yourself. I was in the Israeli Scout, the intelligence forces, did my engineering studies in Ben Gurion, started a few companies. Today, as you heard, I also have a startup in cybersecurity called Tabuki, volunteer and take part in all kinds of other organizations. But the main focus for us is SpaceIL. I'll tell you a bit about my personal story through this journey. Let's start.
In the beginning, I was only an idea, a dream, a fantasy. I was born in a bar to 3 fathers. Soon, I met the rest of my family. I had people who took care of me and helped me grow, and I grew and became stronger. When I met the president of our country, he told me that I carry with me the hopes and dreams of a nation. And he was right. Landing on the moon is not my only mission. I will carry with me a magnetometer to study the magnetic fields of the moon. But one of my most important missions is to inspire our kids so they can dream and explore new worlds. And my mission begins today. A couple of weeks ago, I left home and got on a plane to Cape Canaveral. I had hundreds of talented people who worked hard to prepare me for this day. I waited long enough for this moment, and I am ready. Yalla, let's get to the moon.
Okay. So I like to say that SpaceIL for me actually started on Facebook. A friend of mine called Yariv wrote that he wanted to open the Israeli team competing in the Google Lunar X Prize. Automatically when I saw that, I told them, if you're serious, I'm in. And this is how we started a competition to land the private unmanned spacecraft on the moon. We met, the 3 of us, in a pub in Hulon, in the city of Hulon. They are smiling. In Israel, I'm looking for smiles. I heard that there was one pub back then. Now I heard there's another one. So 3 engineers sitting in a bar. I'm a communication system engineer. Yariv is an electronic engineer. Jonathan is our space engineer. And we sat there and started to design the spacecraft. Those pages are the pages as the actual pages we actually wrote on that day. You can see the timeline, planning to land by the end of 2012. There is a small smiley here, a basic design, and some calculation that were actually calculating how much fuel do we need. When we look at the smartphone, we said all the electronics that we need are in that smartphone: computer, electronic system, communication system, sensor, cameras, everything is there. We're missing the fuel. We saw that it's around 1 to 4. Okay, for each kilo you want to take, you need 4 kilos of fuel. Well, a smartphone is less than a kilo. Just to be sure, we said 5 kilos. Okay, a lot of extras. And this was the initial design. Well, the spacecraft became bigger. From that design, this is the initial design on AutoCAD, 10 on 10 on 30 centimeters. It became bigger. We moved from 1 fuel tank to 2 fuel tanks to 4 fuel tanks to bigger 4 fuel tanks. And eventually, only in 2017, we got to the understanding of how the spacecraft is actually going to look like. It took us around 2 more years to actually have the spacecraft built and ready for launch. There were a lot of memes on the internet about that. This is what product wants, and this is what R&D did. Okay, so To be honest, it wasn't exactly a product. Alex Padua was the one who helped build the upper one. The engineers build the bottom one. And I like to say, usually to entrepreneurs, that each spacecraft had its own goal. The one on the bottom, its goal is to actually get to the moon and land there. And the one on the top is the one that you can actually use in order to fundraise, because there is a place for logos there. And you can see there isn't on the bottom one. So everything is important. So as I said, we moved from that initial design that we sent when we registered into the competition to a much bigger one, from 5 kilos to 500 kilos, a bit bigger. But basically, if you can see, the concept was similar, really small amount of electronics, but a lot of fuel tanks. If you take out the fuel, the weight is 160 kilos, and even that is mostly the fuel system and the engine. Solar panels, cameras, antennas, specially designed legs. This is the spacecraft. But not just the spacecraft became bigger, the team became bigger. From 3 guys, we moved to a group of volunteers. We moved to a group that is partially volunteering, partially workers. Eventually, we got to this team, around 40 people, full-time employees in SpaceIL, another 40 in the Israeli aerospace industries, those you cannot see their faces, a few more in the Weizmann Institute, and a lot of, and hundreds of volunteers that are also took part in our educational mission. We also got the support, beside of the Israeli aerospace industries, of the Israeli Space Agency, donors, academia, commercial sponsors, educational partners, and many more. And after 8 years, we got to the spacecraft that was ready to launch. Before we launched it, we did a lot of testing. This is the vacuum chamber, where you take out all the air and you heat it and cold it like somewhere between plus minus 200 degrees to make sure everything can sustain the mission, because things in space must work on the first time, so there's a lot of testing. And also, before we sent it, we also added 2 things. One is a time capsule that holds 50,000 books in 37 languages. It holds symbols of Israel. It holds blessings and drawings that kids send us, images of us with the kids that we've met, everything inside the spacecraft. And the designer of the special disc did the calculation, and they believe it's still in one piece on the moon. So that's that. We also put a scientific experiment, a magnetometer, that during the landing also collected data about the magnetic field on the moon, and we're analyzing it today. So we packed it, we shipped it. If you missed this, I think this is one of my favorite pictures. Spacecraft in front of you, going into the airport. We loaded on a plane, and I'll use this moment to speak about also something else. This is not just the first Israeli spacecraft. This is the first private spacecraft. And I'm using this moment because usually when a country builds a spacecraft, they have their own Air Force. So if they're sending the spacecraft, they will take a special plane from the Air Force and will fly the spacecraft. But we are not the government. We don't have an Air Force. So we just use a commercial shipment in order to take the spacecraft to the States. And some people say that there were oranges there. As far as I know, it was medicine. But again, for people from the space industry, the fact that you use something commercial to take your spacecraft, and the fact that when it started to fly from here to the States, it actually stopped in Europe to drop something along the way, is something for people that is not logical from people from the space area. And this is us. So we got to Florida. We connected it on top of an Indonesian satellite in the SpaceX facility. We got to the launch, last testing, oil, water. I'm joking. This is not how you actually test a spacecraft. Yes? Okay. But last testings, and we got to the launch. SpaceX did amazing work. They dropped it exactly where they needed. We didn't need to do any other adjustment. It took the spacecraft a few more seconds to start. It was really challenging moments, but eventually it started on its journey. It was a long journey. This is the first picture we published of the spacecraft with the Israeli flag, with big dreams, small country, big dreams, Am Yisrael Chai, and Earth on the background. We were excited from this moment, and it was a long journey. I won't go into all of it, but I will go to one specific maneuver, which is the lunar capture maneuver. And the reason I believe this is the most important maneuver is that after we rotated around Earth and get farther and farther and farther from Earth, eventually we got to the point that we are meeting the moon, and the moon's gravity is pulling us so strong that it's higher than the escape velocity. Which means that if we would not use our engine to stop, we would just be thrown to the middle of the solar system somewhere without any ability to actually contact and have communication with the spacecraft. This happened a week before the landing, and let's see how it went. So we're rotating for the last time around Earth, we're getting to the moon, and we have to use our engine. We had one shot and one backup 50 minutes later, and that's it. You can see it from above. You can see that we need to rotate, to use our engine, stop ourselves, and make sure we'll catch the moon. So this worked, and these are two pictures that were taken just after the maneuver, one after the other. Okay? What happened in between was this that was shown on the screen in front of us. The first image from the moon, from the spacecraft taking a picture of the moon. There are a few more pictures later. Some people didn't understand what this is, the round on the top. So again, a few memes on the internet, just to make sure you understand. This is Earth. And before we'll get to the landing, I want to show you something that we added lately. And we looked at how many launches it took for each and every country to actually reach the moon. So the US, it took them 16, the Russian 22, the Chinese 3, and should be noted they had 100% success. The first two times they didn't try to land. The third time they tried and succeeded. But Israel is the first country in history that had the chutzpah to try to actually land on the first time we get there. So, should be noted. Thank you. So we got to the landing. I will share that a few minutes before the landing started, we saw that there was one parameter that still needed to be fixed. And while Bibi was getting into the hole, we sent a command and fixed it. And actually, the landing started really well. Everything worked out. We got another image from the moon showing that we're getting closer. And I'll stop for a moment and talk about it. From early beginning, we imagined this moment. We wanted to make sure that everyone will be part of it. We thought about what we need to do in order to engage those people. So eventually, and how to create, a moment that everyone will remember in the future. So eventually, this didn't happen, okay? There wasn't anything on Rabin Square, but there was, as you've heard, a 38% rating on TV. And beside that, there were still millions of people watching online, not just in Israel, all around the world, really, literally everywhere. And by the way, not just Jewish communities. As I told you, it's the first private spacecraft. So there were people that were looking for a whole different angle and want to see what can happen in the private space world. But as I said, we thought about it, and 8 years in advance, we imagined how this is going to look like. And this is the illustration that we did of what we want to get. And this is eventually what we received. So the spacecraft, legs with the moon and the Israeli flag. But then, Yehud, we had a problem. One of the subsystems failed. And it actually wasn't one problem. There were a few problems together. One of them is something that we tackled all along the mission, and that's a failure and some misunderstanding between two of the teams. And eventually we sent a command to try to hold the spacecraft, and was a set of scenarios that got the engine to stop. It got back again, but it didn't work. It stopped again, and eventually we got this last image, but eventually got to the moon in a bit higher speed than expected, 1 kilometer per second. So we did land. We hard landed on the moon, not soft landed. And as promised, the picture that NASA took after we landed to show that we actually made an impact on the moon. And I'll go now and look at our mission and what's special about it. So this is actually the first mission of a small country, the first mission for Israel, of course. This is the first non-governmental mission, the first private one, the first ride-share, as I told you, the smallest spacecraft that was ever designed. Okay, just to compare, we had 100 engineers. In Apollo, they had 400,000, okay, working on this project. And even the budget, it's really a fraction of similar missions, and almost no redundancy from the engineering perspective. We got amazing support from all over the world. The head of NASA, the previous head of NASA, Buzz Aldrin, but really, literally everywhere. And now we'll go to this image that all along and through those years, I said that this, I think, summarizes what we're trying to do. Those kids watching that TV, we wanted to make that impact and also to show kids that science can be exciting. This is why we actually had hundreds of volunteers going into classrooms. We've met more than 1 million kids. We've created content that they can watch. We gave them challenges that we tackled to let them tackle it themselves. This is something that we worked on. We gave a new meaning to the phrase educational marketing. We looked at ourselves as marketer for education, for STEM education, for science, engineering, technology. And we used all those tools that marketers used, for example, prime time, to actually get kids to talk about Star Trekkers and to have in Friday dinners talks about how the moon is right now, how the spacecraft is rotating around the moon. And it was amazing. We wanted to show those kids that the spacecraft is not just built from an engine or a solar panel. It's built of resilience and teamwork and dreaming and overcoming obstacles. These are the messages that we try to convey, and we look at ourselves as different because there are a lot of organizations that try to show that science is cool, but we're doing that inspiring by doing, okay? We're actually building the spacecraft and just showing what we do, and through that showing those kids that it's exciting and fun and amazing. In the beginning, we call it Apollo effect. Now we call it Bereshit effect. And we were lucky to have, we didn't think about it before, but to have Purim there in between. And so many kids got dressed as the spacecraft, as an astronaut. And we got so much responses before the landing and after the hard landing. And kids that are telling us that they want to build the future spacecraft. And before we announced that we're going to start Bereshit 2, we got this. As you can see, Bereshit 2, they already built it. Everything is ready. So, the future of space exploration, the future for SpaceIL, as you've heard, we are thinking about Bereshit 2 right now is trying to understand. We understand roughly that we will take around 2.5 years and probably around $60 million that we are raising, and we'll start the project when we'll know we have actually the money in order to do that. And that's on one perspective. Beside that, we are continuing in our educational work to continue to inspire kids. But if you look at the greater perspective, we show the world that you can go and land on the moon. Private organization can do that, and they are working to make that happen. We are a nonprofit. You have for-profit. You have nonprofit universities that now can go and explore the universe in ways that were never done before. And even for you, the engineers here, I will say that, as you know, humanity is going to go back to the moon and get humans there and to Mars, and they will need a lot of designers to build those tools that need now to be used in outer space and in the new places that we're reaching. And
And before we'll really finish, a few last words. When I saw that sentence for the first time, I was excited and decided to use it every time I finish a lecture. And it shows that the world impossible is actually impossible. And there are two things about that. One is sometimes when you take something impossible and you need to break it down a little, just a little, in order to understand that it's possible. But the second part, which is more important, and when we're talking about SpaceIL, I believe that we're talking about dreams, and everyone have their own dreams. And the only way to make something impossible possible, and the only way to actually fulfill your dreams is the I'm part, is if you are going to do whatever is needed to make that happen. And I wish you all to do whatever is needed to make your dreams come true. And really, last slide, this is Or and Maayan that were with me in the lunch. And if a second ago, I wished all of you to do whatever is needed to make your dreams come true, I wish myself, but to be honest, I believe all of us, that you will dream about things that will make the world better for our kids. Thank you.